the Friday before the end of recruiting, I decided I wanted to go to Oklahoma State. So my mom and dad said, well, that's fine, but you got to call Switzer.
Yeah.
Well, I'm 18 years old, and I got to call, the guy that can do no wrong, and probably the most powerful guy in this state, and tell him no, which nobody did.
'22, got 149 wins, and OSU is now one of the more consistent, winningest programs in the nation. But it started with a kind of ugly win against Montana State. What do you remember about that first game, your first win as head coach?
We thought that we would be in much better physical condition than them, coming from the far northwest part of the country and playing down here in the heat. Mm-hmm. And we were pretty average. I found out after that day. I vividly remember scoring the first touchdown. We going for two, catching them off balance. First drive, we went right down the field and scored. It was 8-0 with 11 minutes to go in the first quarter. And I thought, this is great. And I think that's the last touchdown we scored. And we didn't play very good. We ended up winning the game. But I learned a lot just from the standpoint of to really not overestimate where I thought we were as a team and just how novice I was as a head coach, not having a clue what was going on. But I do remember thinking that at least we won this game. Wouldn't have been a good way to start my career personally.
But that was kind of like 6 months after your announcement. Mm-hmm. Not kind of like, it was 6 months
right
after your announcement. And you have mentioned that you had the news conference, you're introduced, you go downstairs into your office, which mm-hmm. Les had moved out of, but it was still stuff laying everywhere. You had on your coat and tie, and then you said, basically, now what?
That's right. So we had the press conference upstairs, and then kind of cleared out. Family left. So I went down and went into what was Les's office at that time and closed the door. There was nobody around, and that's exactly what I sat down and I thought, okay, I need to come up with some plan so people at least think I know what I'm doing, because you don't really prepare for those things. So when I first thought that I might be the head coach was two or 3 days before we played the bowl game against Ohio State, when the talk about Les leaving. But there still wasn't a real guarantee I was going to get the job. So I thought about it a little, but we had the game coming up, and then when we got back, it happened really fast after the game. And so I didn't have much prep time. So then I got in my office and shut the door and started to write some things down that I thought, this is what I should do. And I knew I needed to try to find at least one coach to stay with me, so I would have some help, because most everybody on the staff was going to go to LSU. They were going to double or triple their salary to start with. And LSU had a much more success over a period of time. So I was able to keep Joe DeForest, convince him to stay, make him an assistant head coach, different things. And then he and I worked hard together for a couple weeks to keep the recruiting intact. He was out all the time. Then we started to get some names of guys to start hiring. And back then you used to have the convention and everybody went. Yeah. We didn't have the playoffs and things, and everybody went to the convention. So we flew down there and interviewed, I don't know how many guys we interviewed. We might have interviewed 30 guys for certain positions. And so once we got some guys hired and got them in, then we could have staff meetings where guys could give me information. So we all worked together. Then it was smoother, still a long, long ways off, but it was smoother because I at least had people that could give me information, so I wasn't doing all the thinking myself.
So when you got hired, in a way, it was like a culmination of like a natural loop, because you grew up in Oklahoma and you were player of the year. And you were a multiple sport guy, wrestling, baseball, and I even read, I didn't know this, they mentioned in your first bio as a player that you might have done some kicking if needed.
Yeah, I kicked and punted and in high school. Kicked field goals and punted and kicked off, and then I punted in college. I was a backup punter.
Really? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did not know that.
Yeah.
I also did not know your dad was a scholarship football player here.
Basketball.
Oh, is that basketball?
Yeah, he played, Henry Ives signed him. So,
wow,
so my dad,
I did not know this.
My dad was a quarterback and a baseball player and a really good basketball player. He held the state record for the most points scored in a game. He scored 40 points in a game in 1957. That's a lot of points for one person. He held that record for a long time. And then Coach Ibe assigned him to play basketball here. Came in here and played basketball as a freshman, was on the freshman team then. And spent too much time playing pool, drinking beer, and building race cars, and ended up not making it, and then transferring and playing. Went to Connors, went to Cameron, UCO, played football at several small schools. Then went to California and graduated from Cal Polytech in Pomona.
So how young were you when you guys started being really competitive, like in your home growing up? Were you like 4 or 5 years old, and all of a sudden you're competing and playing sports and playing ball?
When we were kids?
Yeah.
So we started when we were young, and we either played baseball or wrestled or played football year round. We played basketball in elementary. We were always doing something. We either worked or we were playing some kind of a sport. The travel sports, when I was young, weren't as prominent as they are now.
Yeah.
Like if you were good local around the city, then you were on a little pickup team and you might go play a couple, 3 tournaments in maybe Texas or somewhere, but not like it was now. So, but we were always playing some kind of sport. You know, it was interesting. I told my kids when I was in 5th and 6th grade, I played for the school. Our elementary schools had a team. They had their own team. And so you practiced right after school. School got out at 3, you practiced hour and a half maybe, or you played games once a week on a Tuesday. But when that was over, I went home and ate dinner, and then my dad took me to play for another team at night on what would be a travel football team. So I was playing, for years, I played on 2 teams at the same time in football. Now I liked it, I liked playing, but that's pretty unusual for what back then was pretty unusual. My dad had me playing on 2 teams.
Did you get to a point that you had to specialize in football, or did you stay multi-sport all the way through?
I played multi-sports all the way till I got to, my freshman year in college, I played baseball for Coach Ward. Went over and after football and went through all the fall workouts and went through the early spring scrimmages and such. But I was behind Ventura and Monty Ferris.
Yeah.
I was a shortstop, third base guy. Well, I'm not cracking into that lineup as a true freshman. 2 guys that are really good. So then when spring ball started, I was going to be a utility guy. So Coach Jones said, you need to come back and go through spring since you're not starting. And I agreed to that. And so I came back, and then I never went back. That was probably one of the things that I regret most in the next year not going back, because Monty Ferris moved on. Now Robin was still there. But Monty moved on at shortstop, and I never went back over there and played for them. I wish I would have, but I just never did.
How long did you wrestle?
Started at age 4, and I wrestled up until age 16.
So, and you like recruiting wrestlers for football? What
Yes.
do they bring to the table for?
Well, the toughness. When you're on the mat, it's just you. There's no finger pointing. You learn to. You have to pull weight. You have to go days without eating, control your weight at a young age, which is difficult. And then you have to be a fierce competitor. Guys wrestle with broken noses, eyes busted. We trained in facilities that were 85 degrees. It's not a normal process for a human. Wrestling instilled the toughness in me and allowed me to play college football. Because I wasn't very big. I mean, when I came to college as a true freshman, I was 6 foot, and I weighed 167 pounds. That's what I weighed. And I played that year. The next year I came back, I was 6 foot and a half, whatever, and weighed 190. So I was more fit to play at this level. The only reason I was able to play at this level was because wrestling. Wrestling made me tough, and I was able to ignore pain. And it's such a disciplined sport.
So now you're going through high school and you become the Oklahoma High School Football Player of the Year. That comes down to recruiting, and that really was a bedlam choice for you, right?
That's right. So I went to Midwest City High School, and they had been, I don't know if I ever missed a game growing up as a kid ever since I was this tall. my parents we went to the games, rode home or away. And Midwest City had made, I think we made the playoffs 47 years in a row. And when I finished, my coach was Coach Evans. And between Coach Evans and Coach Darnell before him, I think those were the only two coaches for like 30-something years. And they had been to the state finals, I think 6 times, and not won. And my senior year, we won. And that was probably the biggest accomplishment for me, the family, and Midwest City that's happened there and maybe forever, because football is a big deal there. We had not ever won the state championship. Well, I take that back. We won in 1960, but we'd been in it 4, 5, 6 times and not won it as of modern football. So we win that, and when we won that was in December, early December. I don't know, December 6th, 7th, something like that, right out here in the stadium.
And you came from behind to win. Last.
Yeah. Well, we were ahead the whole game, and then I threw an interception. Kid ran it back 65, 70 yards for a touchdown to put them ahead with 1:35 or something like that left. Then we drove the length of the field and scored to win. But when that game happened, I didn't have any offers. No, I didn't have any offers. I was only 160.
This is your senior year?
Yes.
Okay.
This was the first week of December, my senior year. Now, signing day was February 4th or 5th.
Yeah.
But that wasn't uncommon. A lot of times kids got offers in January because recruiting was much different then. Coaches didn't see kids because there wasn't a computers, video, such. It was just the old 16 millimeter tape or film. But there was other quarterbacks in this state that were in my class that already had offers. A kid from Ponca City that was my age named Chris Smith was a really good player, 6'2", 200. He had already had an offer. He had already committed to Oklahoma State. He came and played here. He was in my class, great guy, engineer major. But I didn't have an offer. And then the week after the game, the state championship, OU offered. And my senior year, they won the national championship, which would be in Jamel Holloway running the Wishbone. He was a true freshman from Los Angeles. And they offered me. And I went down there on a visit, and they offered me. And I committed to them, which nobody grew up in this state back then. If Switzer offered you, you committed. That's just the way it was. So I committed. I didn't know anything else. So I was committed to them for a couple weeks. And then Coach Jones and Coach Campbell, the defense coordinator who was recruiting my area, I was in baseball practice. Football was over, and I was walking across from the high school to the baseball field. And Coach Jones pulled up in a Corvette. He had one of those newer models back in 84, 85. They changed the models of Corvettes. And he pulled up in a Corvette with Coach Campbell. And I was just walking across to baseball practice. I remember exactly where I was. And a couple buddies with me were heading over there to practice, and he stopped, rolled the window down. Hey, what's going on? Blah, blah, blah. Talk. And he said, why don't you come in this weekend and visit? It's probably like a Wednesday or something. And back then you went on Friday, stayed Friday night, Saturday night, went home Sunday. That's just what you did. That was a big deal back then, because I had been here to watch games because I was local during the season. I would drive up and they'd give me tickets to the games. But you didn't take visits and go through the campus and look at facilities back then. We didn't do that. So he said, well, just come up for, eat good food, stay in a hotel, have a good time, that spiel. But I was already committed to Oklahoma. And you didn't do that. You didn't do that back then. If you were committed back then, I think I know there was cheating that went on across the country, but it was different. They'd go in and buy players at the end and they didn't go visit and stuff. They'd just go in the end and buy them and sign them. So I said, well, I'm not sure, Coach. I said, I was worried about what my mom and dad would say more than me. Back then, you just didn't do stuff like that. So I said, well, let me talk to my mom and dad, whatever. Just come on up, just eat some food. Coach Jones is talking fast, and come on. You're not going to hurt anybody. Well, they hadn't even offered me a scholarship. So I went home, talked to my mom and dad, and I said, I probably should go up there and just look around. because Jamal Holloway's a true freshman. And I know that OU's going to be really, really, really good on defense because they're really, really good on defense every year anyway. So if nobody scores on them and he's running the wishbone, they're going to score. How am I ever going to get on the field? Because they're not going to take a guy out that just won a national championship at quarterback.
And you guys have sort of, different skill sets. You and Jamal
Not even
Holloway.
close, yeah. Now, I run option in high school.
Yeah.
I ran veer option, okay? But back when I was in school, everybody ran option. We weren't in the wishbone. We were in the split back, veer option, read to pull it, keep it, or pitch it. And I did that, 12, 15 times a game. I threw it some, but we ran option. And I rushed for, I probably rushed for 500 yards my senior year just from running option. But I wasn't a runner,
Right.
not like Jamel.
Yeah.
And I knew, I was smart enough to know, how am I going to ever beat that guy out if they're still winning? So I said, I'm going to go up here and just look, whatever. So anyway, I go up here, look around, all that. I had a good feel. I just liked the people. Obviously, Coach Jones is, in his own way, a character. But I just felt different here. I felt really comfortable. And then they had Ronnie Williams coming back, who had just taken him to, they had been to 2 Gator Bowls. Ronnie just took him to the Gator Bowl, and they won 10 games. And Ronnie was 6'4", 220 pounds, and he eventually played in the NFL at tight end for 4 or 5 years. So it wasn't like I was going to come in and beat him out either. But they were more of a pro-style offense. OU was running a wishbone. So left my visit, went back home, and told my mom and dad, maybe I should go to Oklahoma State. I said, when I just look at what I really want to do, I want to play, I like to be on the field. I know their quarterback's back, but their style of offense gives me a chance. I don't know if I can run the wishbone. So the gal that I'm married to now, I was dating when this took place in high school. So I had no more gotten back.
You should say the one that you've always been married to, not necessarily the one you're married to now.
The one I'm married to now that I was dating her in high school, Kristen. I got back, and of course we didn't have cell phones, and I was back about an hour, and my phone rings, and my mom said, Kristen's on the phone. I said, okay. I went over, but I hadn't talked to her in 3 days. We didn't have ways to communicate.
Yeah.
And you didn't anyway, you just didn't care. People didn't communicate like that. She calls me and says, hey Mike, Coach Switzer has been calling me. And I said, he's been calling, what do you mean Coach Switzer? He said, she said, Coach Switzer's been calling my house and talking to me about coming to Oklahoma. And I go, I don't know. She was already pre-enrolled to come here. And he found that out. He has ways of finding everything out. So he started calling her, telling her that she can come to Oklahoma, she can get in school, he'll get her enrolled, put her in the classes, you want to be in a sorority, whatever.
So he's recruiting her.
Big time. And of course, you have to understand, back then, she knew who he was, but her dad was just flipping, doing backflips. He can go to the office the next day and say, hey, Barry Switzer's calling my house, talking to my daughter. So anyway, that was all going on at once. And it was unique in the way it transpired. Well, I took about a week to make a decision, and then the Friday before the end of recruiting, I decided I wanted to go to Oklahoma State. So my mom and dad said, well, that's fine, but you got to call Switzer.
Yeah.
Well, I'm 18 years old, and I got to call, the guy that can do no wrong, and probably the most powerful guy in this state, and tell him no, which nobody did. So I said, well, nobody, he'll not, if, somebody can call him. No, you're calling him. Okay. So I finally got up enough guts to call him. And when I did, I still remember my mom cried that I wasn't going to Oklahoma, because I'd already committed, people knew it. She grew up right there. Anybody grew up where I grew up, you went to Oklahoma. Most people did. So anyway, I called him, told him. He was not happy, did not hide not being happy. Now, he was fine. He didn't need me. Yeah. He had tons of players. I think they wanted me, but he didn't need me, okay? So he wasn't happy, which he got over it. They signed Charles Thompson. He and I are in the same class. And Charles run circles around me and run the wishbone. And he was a magician at running the wishbone. So anyway, that's how all this took place. And it's an unusual story how it all got to this point, but it's a pretty long journey.
So when you're a freshman, you mentioned Ronnie Williams, and he was big, strong, really strong arm is what I remember about him, like throw a ball through a wall.
No doubt.
So he was struggling a little bit with turnovers.
Yes.
So the legend is that you were in the locker room at halftime of a game against Houston.
That's correct.
Without any pads in your uniform because
correct.
You were supposed to red shirt.
That's correct.
So that's all accurate.
So I was the third or fourth guy. I had been practicing, and I would get just a few reps in 7-on-7, but I wasn't getting any team reps, any scout team reps with the 1s or 2s. But I would get, Coach Coker would throw me in and I'd get 2 or 3 reps at the end of the day on 7-on-7. That was it. And so we opened the season down at Raging Cajuns down there.
At that time, Southwestern
and we
Louisiana.
almost lost. I think Ronnie threw a fade to Hartley Dykes to win the game in the end, or we almost lose. We didn't really do much on offense, and I think we had a couple turnovers. Then we played Tulsa, I believe, next, and same thing. And Ronnie Williams, who's a good friend of mine and been a great ambassador for Oklahoma State, still comes back to our player reunions. I think he threw 2 picks. I know 1 for a touchdown. And so, but the interesting thing was, so if Coach Jones or Coach Coker or anybody had any indication that if this continued, we might try something new, they didn't change the practice reps. So even after the Tulsa game, I'm almost sure we played Houston next. That was the 3rd game. They didn't give me any additional reps in practice. Nothing changed. Ronnie got his reps. Roderick Gaines got his, the second team guy. And then I would get a little bit of 7-on. That was it. And then so we played Houston here in the home game, and I had my pants on and I didn't have any pads in them because, I wasn't going to play. And then I didn't get taped. And I was just sitting there watching, and we struggled again. And I think Ronnie might have thrown an interception. I can't remember for sure, but we just struggled. So when we went in at halftime, I'm just kind of hanging out. I'm a non-factor. I'm not playing in games or whatever. I'm just learning college football. There used to be 150 guys on the team. Probably half the people that were in the organization didn't even know my name. So I was just kind of hanging out. And so we went in at halftime, and I just went over. Back then, you had a JV locker room and a varsity locker room. So I was over in the JV locker room. I wasn't even over in the varsity locker room. And I was just over there, sitting there with all the rest of us, because back then everybody redshirted. And, we're all over there. We're not sweating. We're not doing anything. We're talking about what we're going to do after the game. And Coach came over there and said, I could tell when he was not happy. He said, you ready to play? And it's me. He said, no, you're going to have to go in the game. And I said, sure. And, of course, he walked off, and then I about peed my pants. But I wasn't going to let him know that. I said, sure, I'm ready if you need me to play. Well, he said, you need to get ready then. So then Coker comes in and says, hey, you're going in the game. You're going to play. I said, well, I don't even have any pads in. Well, you better get some pads. So I'm in my locker trying to get pads. And back then, the pads were with a belt.
Yeah.
They weren't like they are nowadays. So I'm trying to do all this and get everything ready and
the
put all that
pads
together.
Are up here on your side like this.
Yeah, they tie into your hips, and I'm trying to get dressed and find some pads, and I'm not even taped. I just said forget getting taped. And then I go out, and I'm going down and coming down the tunnel down here on the east end. And Coach Jones says, you're in. You need to go to play. You got to go. I want you to play. I said, I'm rolling. I'm ready to go. So anyway, I played, and I don't know. I threw for I think 160 yards maybe in the second half. We ended up losing, but I think we scored a couple touchdowns or whatever. So then from that point on, I was the starter. Now, there was still some debate afterwards, like there always is. Is he the starter? We go back with him, go back and forth, and Coach just said he's the starter until he's the starter. So then from that point on, I was a starter. So then in practice, I was taking the reps with the ones in 7-on-7 and taking the reps in team with the ones, which I hadn't had any of that. And there was an adjustment for the team. I mean, I'm pretty sure the team didn't want me to be the quarterback. They didn't even know me. Mm-hmm. They had been with Ronnie a couple years. Ronnie had, led him to 10 wins, and he wasn't playing good, but I mean, Ronnie was kind of their guy. And all of a sudden now, here's a kid that's playing 165 pounds and just out there playing. So when I look back on it, I think they probably didn't even want me in there playing, but I wasn't smart enough to figure that out. I just played.